How would somebody go about doing that as far as like their healthcare? How would somebody go about building their team? But what do you feel? Are there any risks to AI or to these corporations getting involved in the space? What's your health protocol? What was your experience as a female entrepreneur? Thank you for being here on Sauna Sessions. I love you. I love what you do. I love who you are. The energy that you carry is rare. It's contagious. And a lot of times when I see people who have this, they walk the talk, they have this very vibrant spirit about them. Usually it's not because they had a life full of sunshine and rainbows or everything was perfect. Usually they went through something.
Yeah.
And I know you've gone through something that led you to write a book, The Patient as the CEO. And so I'd like to ask you, how did that book come about? And what was your journey to realizing that the patient should be the CEO?
So that goes back to when I was a teenager. I was misdiagnosed with an autoimmune disease, ended up resulting in 43 hospitalizations, 6 major surgeries, and 3 organs removed. By the time I was 26, this was 7 years after I'd had my entire large intestine surgically removed. It's called a total colectomy with J-pouch. That's just the technical name of what I had done. And my doctors were telling me I was cured because removal of the large intestine is a cure for ulcerative colitis. But I didn't have ulcerative colitis. And so for 7 years, basically, I was just treated for pain. I wasn't treated for any type of disease. I was just treated for pain. So over a period of time, they kept upping my opioid dose until eventually they switched me over to 80 milligrams a day of methadone. Now, that is a gigantic dose of medication, and I absolutely hated it. And so I went back to my doctor as soon as I could get in, and I said, I need off this medication. I think the rebound pain is worse than the original pain. And so, because that happens with opioids. And so she said, okay, well, next step could be to think about surgically implanting a morphine pump into your spine. It's like, are you kidding? I was 26 years old. I was essentially a shut-in. I could barely function on a daily basis. There were days where the pain was so out of control, like the hardest thing I could do was like take a shower. And what I was hearing was that was the rest of my life. And so I said, absolutely not. And I fired my entire healthcare team. Went home that night and to fire your healthcare team, you just stop going to them, right?
Wow.
I went home that night, dropped my own methadone dose by 40%, right? Which is a massive drop in opioids. At that point, you're risking seizures, but I, was in my mid-20s and I didn't have access to that kind of information because that didn't exist, right? Outside of being a physician. And so I spent a week crawling across the floor, going through severe opioid withdrawal by myself. The only thing I could do was go from the bedroom, crawl into the kitchen to get lemonade and salt. And I lived on lemonade and salt for 7 days.
You were by yourself?
I was all by myself. And then, all of a sudden, I felt significantly better, right? Because I went through all that withdrawal. I was still on the opioids at that point, but that jump started it. And so at the end of the week, when I felt a little better, I rebuilt my care team. With doctors that worked with me as a team, right? And a colleague and not just a patient. I ended up getting diagnosed correctly with Crohn's disease, put on an IV medication called Remicade. Within 24 hours of that very first dose, I went into remission.
Wow.
It happened overnight.
Wow.
So that's what the patient as CEO is about, is like taking control of your healthcare. Not only, can save your life, and in my case, absolutely it saved my life, but it gave me back my life. Right?
It gave you back the light too.
What
kind of magic are you using in here? What's going on? Some people say, if you want a new idea, open an old book. And I'm a huge fan of like ancient medicine, ancient wisdom. And when you go back to, Hippocrates, right, the father of medicine, he said, if you're not your own physician, you're a fool. And it seems like I always believe that. I believe that we have to take control and sovereignty over our own lives and especially over our own health. So you fired your team and you built a new one. And now you are because you are now in the CEO, that position of picking and choosing. Like you don't have to know right? The ins and outs of how everything works. You just hire the right people to help you. That's awesome.
Exactly. Like the CEO of a corporation. You're not an expert in legal or finance or marketing necessarily, but you're an expert in the global view of that company. And it's your responsibility that anything that your team comes up with gets executed, right? And so that's the patient. The doctors and the nurses and clinicians, these are all part of the team. But if you are not in control, you know, bad things can happen.
Yeah. You know, I talked to I'm like a business development coach, and he's like, yeah, you should hire the right team, but you should also know a little bit about, you know, how to do each thing. You should have oversight, but you should put the right people in place so that you don't have to spend your time and energy doing that. You should rather put people who do that way better than you in those places.
Exactly.
Yeah. Love that. I love that philosophy. I think it's a golden nugget. The patient should be the CEO. We should be the CEOs of our own lives. We should have finance coaches. We should have health coaches, right? Every aspect of our life, we should have a team, I think, helping us in order to optimize our existences here.
Absolutely.
How would somebody go about doing that as far as like their healthcare? How would somebody go about building their team?
So it depends on what you need, right? So if you're a severe chronic disease patient, you're going to need a lot of specialists and you're going to need access to different types of testing. And so, of course, it all starts with the primary care.
Okay.
I love One Medical because the customer experience, right? It's for the first time, I feel like the electronic medical records are really easy to use and I can easily chat with the team whenever I need it. And they're never late and they have blood labs right on site. And so like they've made it really, really easy to do. And now, of course, One Medical is owned by Amazon, which is a pretty big deal.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, right?
Huh. When did that happen?
It just closed about 2 or 3 months ago. They bought it for $3.9 million. And right beforehand, One Medical had just bought Iora Health for $2.2 billion. That one was an all-stock deal. Which means Amazon now controls primary care from birth to death. That is huge because Iora Health is the Medicare population. So One Medical is no longer the walking wealthy right? And now it's really across the care continuum with Amazon. But that's just the first step, right? So you've got your primary care who can then, find specialists for you. If you already have specialists that you don't like, absolutely just change systems. Yeah. I was at a hospital about 7 years ago. And I ended up having to change my entire team. And so I just went to the next hospital like a mile away. Okay. I live in the Bay Area. Like we're surrounded by fantastic, medical care.
Okay. Speaking of medical care and medical tech, this is something that you've been in the field for a long time. You've studied it. And I'm just curious are there any cutting edge medical technologies that you see coming out today that are going to revolutionize our world?
Everything that's coming out today. So generative AI, that's also called a large language model. We're already seeing the implications at the earliest stages in the world of healthcare. And so thinking about the shift in care to the patient's home, and that's what most of my keynotes focus on, is really shifting dialysis, IV medication, urgent care, and hospital at home into the home, and all of the different AI tools that really are helping them make it, a more robust offering in many cases than, say, going to a clinic. And so thinking about the fact that with artificial intelligence, life begins at 1 billion data points. And so if you think about
what does that mean? Life begins at 1 billion data points.
If you have less than 1 billion data points, it's not enough to train an artificial intelligence.
Okay.
And I got that phrase from Ray Kurzweil, who's one of my main mentors and a very close friend of mine. And so thinking about some of the devices in the home, right now, the blood pressure monitoring world, right? You go into the doctor once or twice a year and they take your blood pressure and that's your baseline, which is insane to think about. And so some of these devices, especially like the single leads that can, EKGs that can like stick to the patient's chest for 2 weeks at a time. Other companies are using something called PPG technology, stands for photoplasmography. And it was actually, commercialized in 1982. And so this old technology, but the new applications in these patches that go on a patient's chest means they are recording between 1,400 measurements a day if it uses a single lead EKG. And with the PPG technology, they are recording millions of data points every single day on every single patient.
Wow.
That is incredible. And so over the next 5 years, we're going to start to look at blood pressure as just one tiny example a little bit differently, because we're going to have all this continuous, blood pressure monitoring, not just on people when they're at their sickest, but when they're at their wellest, right? So you can get that baseline.
Wow.
And because you're able to take millions of data points every day on every patient, you have enough to start to look at artificial intelligence and pattern analysis, right? I mean, AI is one of the things that AI is best at is pattern analysis. And so starting to look at what is normal blood pressure, what is a baseline for an individual, right? And then those predictive analytics. In fact, one of the companies that has a single lead EKG, that sticks to the patient's chest, they were able to predict with 80% accuracy a cardiac readmission with over 6 days notice.
Wow.
That is a game changer. And this is the early stages of things like predictive analytics and generative AI. Over the next 5 years, this is going to explode. And the big deal that goes along with the technology is so is the healthcare industry. Right. Medicare is really that organization that we look to that really sets a standard of care, because once Medicare covers someone or something specific, then it's really hard as a private payer to say, oh, well, Medicare thinks it's a standard of care, but we don't. Right. And so I call that peer pressure for, the insurance companies. But we're seeing CVS, Aetna, United Healthcare, even the Blues and the Anthem, which is now Elevance Health, spending billions of dollars buying companies that shift care into the home. And so this is a big deal. Like the payers are in on it. Amazon is huge on it. Apple is huge on it. And Walmart is huge on it. And if you think about it, the 5 largest companies in the United States, Walmart, Apple, Amazon, United Healthcare, and CVS, Aetna. All 5 are spending billions of dollars shifting care into the home.
Amazing. Technology is hope. This is something
Technology is hope. Absolutely. Hands down.
I'm a bit of a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. And so when we start talking about, Amazon getting into health and, Walmart and these big companies, what do you feel? Are there any ethical concerns? I know we always need a checks and balances system, but what do you feel? Are there any risks to AI or to these big corporations getting involved in the space?
I mean, there's always risk with everything, right? The more that you are collecting and storing data, there's lots of hackers out there, right? And so there's inherent risk with basically everything you can possibly think of, right? Just because they're spending, all this money on it, or it's got such promising results, there's always a flip side, and it can have really negative results. And so thinking about some of the healthcare data that is used to train artificial intelligence, most of that was done on middle-aged white males. Okay. Right? Like the clinical trials, typically, especially the older drugs, they did not include women at all because the hormonal fluctuations. And so we're starting to see that inherent bias and inherent racism is being kind of baked into some of the AI just because of the quality and the source of the data. And so being able to have these devices in home, even your Apple Watch has a clinical grade single lead EKG on it. And so, really just thinking about the fact that you can now record all of that and these big companies are in on it. Right. So the hackers and the inherent bias that's baked in. Two giant problems.
It's good to know. I mean, AI is one thing, but I think people are obviously, behind the scenes and in control of these things. So getting good, objective people that have these sensitivities and understandings about the world and different populations, I think is super important. If you were the head of, I don't know, the FDA or I guess what changes would you make?
I'd streamline the process, right, of going through clinical trials and FDA clearance, right? It's a lot of red tape, And so really trying to, maximize those types of things. Because if you think about it, with a pharmaceutical is usually at least $1 billion from drug discovery to commercialization, right? I mean, there's a huge commitment of money on something that may or may not work out. And so the more that we can start to reduce that. And so in the world of the FDA, I would start to say, okay, well, we're going to need to really focus most clinical trials on decentralized clinical trials, also called remote clinical trials or siteless clinical trials. Now, this is a big deal for a number of reasons. If you think about if a pharmaceutical company, chooses a geographic location like Boston or LA or whatever, they're limited to that type of person who lives in the vicinity, right? Most patients cannot drive 2 or 3 or 4 hours to be in a clinical trial. And so right there, you're going to get a homogenous type of person. But then secondly, 85% of clinical trials are significantly delayed because they don't have large enough enrollment numbers.
Okay.
So we're not filling these clinical trials with patients when you have that geographic location, but shifting it into the home where you ship by FedEx the medication, and then you deploy a nurse who lives in the area to the patient's home to give the medication and things like that. Not only would that dramatically open up how many people can be in clinical trials, but it will make it a lot cheaper.
You've got a lot of great insight, a lot of great ideas. I wonder if you've been in the space. You're in Silicon Valley. Have you faced a lot of resistance to these ideas?
Depends on where. So in Silicon Valley, no. I mean, everyone has drank the Kool-Aid there, right? But sometimes when I give keynotes in the middle of the country, right, their lives are not completely inundated with technology yet. And so there's a lot of pushback sometimes. Patients can be a little scared, right? Most of the time they're hopeful, but of course, depends on part of the country and how old they are and what's wrong with them.
Right.
But then also the pushback from hospitals sometimes. And let me tell you why. So things like dialysis, well, they're shifting that into the home. Humana, which does the Medicare population, and Medicare have spent a lot of time shifting dialysis into the home. And when I was talking to one of the CTOs that was in the audience, I was like, okay, so why don't you guys just be the ones who offer dialysis in the home so you don't lose that revenue stream, right? And he looked at me and said, because our EMR won't allow it. The software. A software problem. They have no idea how to even start that.
Wow.
Because they're dealing with so much going on with interoperability and software to begin with that to even think about trying to add something like that is difficult. The solution are companies like Bioformis. I don't know if you've heard of them, but it's a data platform and for things like predictive analytics, remote patient monitoring, hospitalizations at home, and clinical trials at home. And they bring, they'll shift in like the nurse or the doctor if they need to like actually see someone in, in the home. But the hospital can work with Bioformis to make all that happen. So they don't have to worry about owning their own dialysis and things like that.
Awesome. Okay. What, I got one more question, and this is on a topic that you know very well, wearables.
Yes.
There's so many ways that we can track our health. I've been getting into, zone 2 training. You familiar with this?
Yes, a little bit.
Like, basically, it's just like a brisk walk or like a slow run where you can still engage in a conversation. To stay in this zone 2 for, they say, 45 minutes to an hour and a half is like one of the best things you can do for longevity and for mitochondrial health. So I have this band that tracks it. I think I'm pretty sure you have apps on your phone or even your Apple Watch can track how long you're in zone 2. Yeah. But I'm just curious, when it comes to wearables, do you use any wearables? If so, which ones are they? And are you excited about any new wearables that are on the market or coming out?
There are a lot that are really, really cool on the market. I don't use them on a daily basis because I am really just standardized everything. I do, my workouts are optimized on a daily basis, and I don't feel sick on a daily basis. Like there's nothing for me necessarily to track right now in my life.
Awesome.
So I have medical devices, and I have nurses that come in home to give me things like my IV medication, but I don't need to track that data yet.
Gotcha.
I do want to start tracking my sleep. And I think I'm a really good sleeper, and I always, but that is one thing that I want to start to do.
What makes you want to, like, how deep you're sleeping?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I don't like to have, things on my wrists and stuff. I'm teeny tiny. So like an Apple Watch, even the small one is giant on me. And so there's some technology companies that are able to track your sleep with external devices that are not actually physically on your body, like a ring or a watch. And so I want to start using those.
Okay. There's I don't like having stuff either. I don't really wear jewelry. There's the Aura Ring, the watches. I think it's not the Chili Pad. It's another pad that you can put, I forget the name of it, on your bed. And that can measure like your sleep, which is interesting. And it also cools the mattress as well, which is great for a deep sleep.
Right? Yeah. Yes. Keep your bedroom at 67 or lower.
That's key.
Yeah.
That's key.
Yeah.
Well, it's about 167 in here. I'm sweating. How you feeling?
I am definitely sweated out all toxins.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get out of here. Let's get a little spa session in, get some water, some coconut water, and continue the conversation, Robin.
Sounds good.
Let's do it. So welcome back to the spa area. How was the sauna for you, Robin?
That was amazing. I thought I was going to be completely overheated. And though I was like sweating out all the toxins and everything, I didn't really get overheated, which was awesome. Yeah.
It's just a nice sweat, It's a nice, relaxing, like rejuvenating thing, the sauna. It's great. Do you know the research on saunas? Like how they're incredible. Like they those all-cause mortality. I think from if you go 3 days a week to 5 days a week, it increases by decreases all-cause mortality by like 40%. It's incredible. Some studies about neurogenesis, growing brain cells, and obviously the cardiovascular benefits, mimicking exercise. It's a great tool. And so what I do in Portugal on my farm, I go from hot to cold, which is like a constriction and expansion. Apparently it has benefits. I feel good. Some biohacking. I can't do it too much. I feel like too much is too much. I feel like you gotta, with these tools, if you overdo it, you can go in the opposite direction and kind of hurt yourself. I did a protocol from Andrew Huberman like a month ago, and it was a sauna protocol to increase growth hormone. And it was like 20 or 30 minutes in the sauna, and then a 10-minute break, and then a 30-minute back in the sauna, and then it was like an hour and a half in the sauna over time. And I had the biggest headache ever after, even though I was taking these electrolytes. So I think it's better, and we were talking about this earlier, is like just consistent actions, even if it's small, just consistent action. What consistent actions do you do? Because you are just a vibrant being, just amazing in every way. What's your health protocol?
So I work out 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Last time I took a full day off of completely working out is when I had a 24-hour stomach flu in like 2017. And so I make sure my mornings are always exact and I don't have to think about it. So I wake up an hour before I know I'm going to go to my Stairmaster and my elliptical because I have them in the home. Or, if I'm in a hotel, I can go to the gym. And then I do an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes up to 2 hours of a workout. And then I shower and then I'm ready for the day, whether that is a Sunday or a Tuesday.
And so tell me, so this is what you are doing. What are you not doing?
What I'm not doing is ever having to make a decision. This is a big deal because something called decision fatigue. If you think about it, we all make hundreds, if not thousands of decisions every single day. And so I don't sit in bed and just like think about going to work out. Oh, should I work out today? Or should I take a day off? Maybe if I did it later on at 7 p.m., it would work better. I never have that discussion in my head. And that's a really big deal, because it just frees up your mind for a lot of other things. But then my body goes on autopilot. I literally cannot stop it. So I'll get up and I'll make my tea and I'll go back to bed and, look at some emails or read the news or whatever I want to do while I wake up. And then I go to the Stairmaster. And I suddenly some days just wake up almost, 45 minutes into my workout and I'm like, well then.
Into the workout.
I mean, literally, I just go on autopilot.
Awesome. Okay. Decision fatigue. There was something you said earlier on break. You said about air quality.
Yes, air quality is a big deal. And so my apartment, I don't have any air ducts. It's a different type of heat. I have my windows open 24/7. I don't have room-to-room carpeting or all of that, where things like molds or dust mites or any other type of allergens like pollen can stick around. And so I make sure I don't have new furniture, so I'm not dealing with off-gassing. And same thing with new paint. Like I don't want to paint my apartment because I don't want to smell the off-gassing. If you're smelling chemicals like that, they're already doing damage.
Wow.
And so clean air is a really big deal. In fact, so much so that CVS Aetna already has their own remote patient monitoring device, which is a smart speaker and sensors that go on the wall to measure air quality and air temperature. That is something that they are already selling and have been for a couple of years now.
Wow.
We are starting to see the payers and the providers take air quality into account.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It makes sense. I mean, it's the breath, right?
Exactly.
That's what we're doing the most. And if you're breathing in toxins, you're chipping away in the wrong direction. You're hurting yourself continuously. In my home, I have the IQ Air HEPA filters in almost every room because it is important. Keep the windows open because a lot of times the air quality inside can be worse than the air quality
almost
outside.
Always, right?
Always,
especially if someone has air ducts and wall-to-wall carpeting. Absolutely.
Almost always.
And I go into these hotels and I try to always find a hotel where the window opens, but it's not always possible.
It's tough.
And so I can smell the difference. Like I walk in and I'm like, there's wall-to-wall carpeting and it's a closed environment where none of the windows open ever. And I don't feel as well after those nights.
Yeah, it's big. Let's pivot a little bit from medical technology in that aspect because you are, like I said, just one of the most amazing people I know. You're an author, a professional speaker, just a light in the world. And I want to ask you, living in Silicon Valley with the likes, these big companies, very like male driven, the Googles of the world and kind of that more of a, I think, masculine, ambitious energy push forward. What was your experience as a female entrepreneur in these spaces?
It was hard. So when I got to Silicon Valley, whatever it was, 13 years ago or something like that, I was pushed down by a lot of the men across multiple companies. Once I had the outside attorney pick me up and put his hands all over my body in front of a whole bunch of the team. Another company, they kept deleting my name off the website like I didn't even exist, stealing my work, pushing me down. And I realized at the time that you can't fight that normal way, right? Like if they are sabotaging you and they're being, deceitful about it, you can't fight that with things like HR. HR is there to help the company, not women from being pushed down. And so I went home one night and over a 2-day period, I wrote out a 5-year project plan to change the game. I didn't want to play their game. I wanted to play my own game. And so this 5-year project plan was on really launching myself as a professional speaker. So if I'm the one on stage, right, nobody can shut me down anymore. And it worked much better than all of my wildest dreams. In fact, when my first book came out, The Patient as CEO, this was in 2015, it changed the power dynamic overnight. Suddenly, I was in a tank and the men that were pushing me down were on horseback. Like it wasn't even a fair fight anymore. Like I was the one with like the big name and on stage that people were listening to.
Because you had the book.
Because I had the book. Yep. And that's all it took was launching a book.
Wow.
Yeah. It changed people's perceptions that quickly. It was incredible. And so when the Me Too movement happened and a few years later, I was like, wait, this happens to other women? Because we always think it's only us, right? We think we're the ones being abused and it's our fault in some way. Turned out it was pretty much all women have had some kind of interaction. And I didn't think calling out the men online and trying to rehash it all was healthy for any party. And there was a lot of shrapnel, right? Like if the man was, married man with, 2 or 3 kids, like all of this was shrapnel and hurting people. So I was like, you know what? I have a solution. Why don't I teach the women and minorities on how to become known for their own personal brand in order to drive their own career goals? It worked for me. Why can't it work for everyone else? And so I took my 5-year project plan and I turned it into a system and a book. And so I launched the book, The Thought Leader Formula, in 2019. So I could really empower other women to be able to do what I did.
Awesome. Love that. You send the elevator back down?
I say, I had to crawl up the outside of the building using my fingernails. And so now that I'm up there, I'm sending the elevator back down for other people.
So important.
Yep.
So important. What is the Thought Leader Formula?
So it's really just a process. So if you think about it, if you want to be a physician or a lawyer, you know exactly what you need to do for like 10 years, right? You get out of high school, you go to, college, undergrad might be something like a science, and then you go to medical school, and then you do residency, and then you do fellowship. Your roadmap is completely decided for you. But with things like professional speakers or becoming a thought leader in some type of vertical, no one has created a roadmap for that. There's no degree that, Thought Leader Formula Inc., right? So what I did is I just created that roadmap for people, especially because I work in healthcare. And so, physicians and scientists, they don't know, or they've probably never taken any business courses, any marketing courses, any finance courses, right? They just spent all their time learning about things like medicine. And so it's essentially branding and marketing 101 for doctors. I mean, it's applicable to any industry, but I was thinking from a doctor's point of view on what knowledge they may or may not have. And so I teach people how to do things like come up with taglines or how to get a book written and how to launch that, how to outline your customer avatars, right? Who do you need to influence? Maybe if you're just trying to get a promotion at work, the people you might be trying to influence might be 5 people, right? So really understanding who your customer is, where to find your customer, right? And then really intersecting with doing what you love. For instance, like I'm a professional speaker. The thing that I love the most in the entire universe, I would do every single day is give a keynote. And so like I figured out really like that is the main drive. But other people, it might be they just want a promotion or they just want to be known for their ideas in some way. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I've read the book. It's applicable to so many different areas. Just leveling up, kind of building your own brand, elevating your voice to be heard.
Yes.
Which is,
heard by the right people at the right time to help you drive your own career or business goals.
That's important.
Right? Yes.
Very important.
Very important.
You say something that I love as well. You say, don't practice something until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong.
Yep.
And I'm actually going to put this on my wall, like in my office, because it's so good. Get into that, expound on that a bit more.
Sure. So when I did my very first keynote, I was, I wanted to come out as a professional off the bat. By my third one, I was already being paid, I think it was $1,500 for my third, keynote ever. And now I've done over 190. Right? But what I did is I practiced it 40 times, 40. It was a 25-minute talk. Then I hired speaker coaches for $1,500 an hour to record me and tell me what I was doing right or wrong. And then with those recordings, I listened to it every single day for over a month. So just to get, the full keynote down. And so I wasn't nervous on stage. I couldn't forget things because if you study a script, right, it gets to a point where it sounds scripted. But if you get to a further point and practice it even more, it sounds natural, right? And so I can't even stop myself from saying things in certain ways anymore. Like there are times where I've been giving like a 45-minute keynote or a 60-minute keynote, and I remember getting on stage, and then I look up at the clock, and I'm like, I've been on stage for 45 minutes, and I didn't even notice because I was so in the zone and so, right on with everything that I was saying. It's because I practiced my keynote until I couldn't get it wrong. Yep.
Practice not until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. That's beautiful. That's a great insight.
Even now, for my normal keynotes, I practice them 10 times after I write the keynote. And I give a different keynote for every single client, right? And so 10 times of practice, whether it's 30 minutes or 60 minutes, every single time.
Love that. If somebody wanted to get into speaking, what would be their first step?
Their first step is really coming up with, okay, what are they going to speak about, right? And if they want to be paid for it is a big difference from just being able to do awareness. So there's only 2 types of events really that even pay for speakers. Corporations, because corporations run events for their clients and customers. They run events for business development purposes, and they run events to educate their employees. And so hiring a $15,000 to $20,000 speaker, you can see the ROI. The money is a direct tie-in to whether it goes for the clients or for the employees. The other big kind of events that pay for speakers are the large associations, like the American Academy of Dermatology or the American Nurses Association or Medical Group Management Association. The reason they're paying for speakers is they pay for 3 plenary speakers typically, and that's it. So there's one speaker on the main stage every day that is probably a professional speaker, and none of the other speakers at the entire conference are professional speakers. And again, it goes back to understanding where the money goes with events. Events are incredibly expensive to run. And in fact, I've run over 150 events myself, been on the team. And some of these, like the profit is only the sponsorship. Like we were selling, $4,000 or $5,000 tickets, and that barely covered what we needed just to, break even. And so events are just very, very expensive things. And so if it's a TEDx, if it's a small meetup, even if it's just like a bunch of friends getting together and they're charging $2,000 for a ticket, most likely none of those are going to be paid positions because the event doesn't bring in enough money to ever pay for speakers. And so if you want to be a professional, it's really the large associations and that kind of thing, as well as the corporations. If you can buy a ticket for an event, it's almost always not paid.
I don't know if I love speaking as much as you do, but I enjoy it. And I think doing the TED events and reaching out is such a good thing if somebody wants to get into that field, because there's so many stories that need to be told. Practice till you can't get it wrong.
I would speak at the opening of an envelope, right? Like at the beginning, because you need that stage time experience. And so I was like, I'll do it every single time just to, get being an idiot, over like in the first 10 or 20, whatever. Okay. But like your TEDx thing, that's a perfect one because it gets a high quality video. If you want to be a speaker, you need a video. But how do you get a video if you're not a speaker, right? It's that catch-22. And so TEDx is a great one. Academic conferences, you almost always can get on a small stage at an academic conference. There might be 5 people in the audience, but you can bring in videographers to actually record you on stage. So you have that video. If you don't have a video and understand your message and how it relates to people who are going to bring you in as a speaker, then you're not going to get anywhere. Got it. What does it mean to be considerate of the future you? What does that mean? So I am prepared for everything, and I'm always early to everything. And so you were early for hair. You beat me. I came not just early. I was like 55 minutes early. Probably an hour. Because I'm considerate of future Robin, and I'm considerate in general, right? But being considerate of future Robin, because I'm a severe chronic disease patient, so I know I'm going to have bad days. So when I flew down here to LA, I have like 2 days worth of food that I know I can eat if I go into, a bad Crohn's attack or something happens where I'm not feeling well. And so I make sure I'm always prepared for future Robin, whether she feels amazing or whether she's not feeling well that day, right? Amazing. I love that. This is what I already have on my wall in my house, and it's everywhere pretty much in my house because I think that out of sight, out of mind. You gotta
put stuff in areas of direct vision as triggers. And this particular quote, it says, "What would your future most developed self do right now?" And I put that just around my house. In my kitchen, I have, "What would your future most developed self eat right now?" So I consider the future Prince, because if I make the right actions now, then that future me will be optimized. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So important. I love that. Consider the future you. That's beautiful. That is actually a great technique that I think can be used in anybody's life to achieve anything. It just changes your mindset, because I think it's so easy to get stuck into a lot of times the past. And even if the present isn't going too well, you can always have a better future, hope for a better future. I wanted to touch on something that, going a little bit back to your medical experience as a patient, you saved a lot of money by switching to not Geico, but to home care.
That was awesome. That was hilarious. Yes. And so I've been on my Remicade for now over 20 years. Please don't do the math. I am obviously 29, but I've been on it for over 20 years. And for the first 15 years, I got it done in normal hospitals. And it was an absolutely terrible experience, because you're in a big room with no windows, 15 other patients, the constant alarms going off that, on the IV poles, and, conversations and everything. About 7 years ago, my insurance company said, "Hey, Robin, you want to stay on Remicade? You're going to have to get it done in the home." I was like, "You can do this at home?"
Great.
She told me that a long time ago. I would have been doing it. And so I switched it into the home using one of the large infusion companies. That has changed the game on the price and on my recovery time. And so in the hospital, it charged $28,000 just for the medication, and I get it 8 times a year. In home care, $2,500. Over a 5-year period, that comes out to a difference in billing of $1 million. Not only that, but my recovery time went from a pretty hardcore 7 days, which I thought was the medication, to 0. By changing the patient's environment. Wow. It's not something we think about, but like smelling all the chemicals in the infusion clinic and being surrounded by infectious disease and being surrounded by noise pollution of extremely high pitched, constant beeping, right? Switching it in the home got rid of all of my side effects. And this is happening, I'm hearing, across the Crohn's community and patients that are on Remicade. They're terrified about pulling it out of the hospital because they felt so sick. But when they did bring it into the home, because the insurance company told them to, all of a sudden, the side effects went away.
What?
It's incredible. That is just how big of an impact environment can be.
That's a sound bite right there. That's wow, powerful. Just on that, if there's somebody listening with a chronic illness, what would you want to say to them? They're going through life with, a lot of pain. They don't know what to do.
So first of all, if they are on an IV medication, or if they have to go into the hospital every once in a while to do something like dialysis or what have you, all of this can be done in the home now. And it's safe. And in fact, it's safer in many cases than being in a hospital, because of course, in the hospital, borne infections are killers. And so being able to be in the home is fantastic. Second thing to think about is pain management. There's no silver bullet, right? I'm in pain my entire life. Like I've spent every single day of my entire adult life in some sort of pain, but I do 20 to 40 things on a daily basis that really helps me keep the pain under control beyond just some simple medications. And that includes surrounding myself with people like you. I mean, you make my day. I talk to you so much to begin with for the past, 4 years that I just smile every time we text back and forth. I have, a great family and support system. I eat well, right? I exercise 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I practice extreme gratitude. When I walk past certain parts of my apartment, it triggers me to think about, wow, I'm the first generation in known human history where as a female, I can make more money than a man. I'm not being forced to be a mom. I don't have to be pregnant. I don't need to get married. I can hold my own credit card. I can have my own bank accounts. I am the first generation. My mom was a physician and she couldn't do that, right? And so really extreme gratitude. I do word puzzles every day. So I text back and forth with my dad and his girlfriend partner. And I do the spelling bee out in the New York Times as well as Wordle every single day. And that's on top of, reading tech news and things like that. But really so many different modalities. And so I would tell someone in pain that you need to start thinking about this as a holistic thing and not an isolated thing. There's no silver bullet. You really need to make your life less stress and much less friction.
Yeah, that stress is a big one. We were talking about laughter and the memes that you send. It really is the best medicine. There's a story that from a guy, his name, I don't know if you're familiar, Norm Cousins. He wrote a book called Anatomy of an Illness. Okay. Long story short, he was diagnosed with an incurable disease. At least that's what they told him in the hospital. After he heard that, first thing he did was say, okay, I got to get the hell out of the hospital. And he left. He rented himself a nice hotel room, rented a bunch of comedy videos, and had his doctor come in and give him intravenous vitamin C. Well, basically what happened was he cured his incurable disease. He attributes it a lot to the laughter, that less stress and that laughter response. He said, I think it was 2 minutes of belly laughter gave him like 2 hours of just pain-free experience. So it's something to it. I think the evidence is there. Lowering stress, changing your environment, so important if you're going through something. So important. Robin, I want to play a quick game. This game, it's like a rapid fire game. I call it the 5 bests. What is the best investment you ever made?
I invested the time and money needed to launch myself as a professional speaker. And that move, and it's been about 10 years now, was the biggest game changer in my entire life and career.
Best book you ever read?
Oh, so I talk about it in the Thought Leader Formula. The person that changed my life was Adam Grant. When I saw him give a talk on stage on givers and takers, because I didn't realize that existed. And so his book about the talk, Give and Take, is one of my favorite books ever. It changed my life.
Best time in your life?
Now.
There you go. That's a good one. That's always a good one. Best quote you ever heard?
Don't miss the forest for the trees.
Big one.
Yep. I use that in my keynotes. I mean, I don't say that phrase, but when I'm building a keynote or when I'm writing a book, I think of that, right? What is the big vision? These tiny little details don't always matter.
100%. It's great. Let's have a fun one. What's the best advice you would give to female entrepreneurs?
Don't give up. I know it's hard, and it's hard for all of us. There are lots of societies and lots of people that help raise up women. Like in the Bay Area, I throw a lot of, events for fun, like salons where we talk about artificial intelligence or precision medicine or something really cool and sexy like that. And I try and raise up as many women as possible. And so go find the Robins in your world.
Find your tribe.
Yep.
Robin, if I gave you a magic wand, you seem like you already have magic wands, by the way. You're just a magical person. If I gave you a magic wand and you could wave this wand at the earth, at planet Earth, boom, and tomorrow when you woke up, that magic wand wish will be granted. What would your magic wand wish be for the planet?
So it would be something I work on, right? Because I only work on things that I think are the most impact. And so I did get to work on curing cancer. We didn't do it, but we had early stage small molecules found through using AI for drug discovery, which would repair P53, which is responsible for about 50% of all cancer. And so I would say I want tomorrow for cancer to be cured, the treatment accessible for everyone who has it.
That's a big one.
Yep.
That's a big one. There's a lot of people who I think that might take money out their pockets. So I don't know if they would want that wish to come true. But I think if they were as enlightened as you are to end the suffering of cancer, because it's such a devastating thing, that would be the wish from their heart. Yeah. So that's a very amazing wish. Robin, where can people keep up with you, find your work, find your books? How can they stay in touch?
I am the only Robin Farmanfarmaian in the entire universe. And so if you Google my name, the first 50 pages of Google are going to be 100% me. Okay. So I'm on, LinkedIn. I just started, doing TikTok a little bit. I'm on Insta and Facebook and Twitter and, all the normal places.
Yeah. What are you working on these days? What's next?
So I've been doing a lot of keynotes lately. And so really just hardcore focusing on, the new generative AI. And so I've added a good 10 minutes to the end, a lot of my keynotes about generative AI. Yeah. I mean,
generative AI, what's that?
So generative AI, it's also called a large language model. A company called OpenAI launched ChatGPT, last November. So that's one of the large language models. And the way they're intersecting healthcare is really, really cool. Already being adopted by companies like Epic, which controls a lot of the electronic medical records. And so we're seeing it both as an AI scribe, a medical scribe, which can automatically transcribe an entire clinic visit, but then also summarize it. Generative AI is incredibly interesting in that respect. But if you had seen that attorney that used ChatGPT to write a brief for him and all 6 cases were made up, they were hallucinated by the large language model, that's a really big deal in healthcare. And so one of the solutions to that is what's called a knowledge graph, or a layer of data that goes over the large language model. So the large language model understands context. It understands how to string words together. It's a statistical tool. But then it needs to go through that knowledge graph filter of very specific medical data, right? And then it can become a little bit more accurate. But the other thing is of course, clinician, whether it's a nurse or a doctor or what have you, needs to always look at what ChatGPT or the equivalent large language model is writing and make sure to check everything. So it's a nice first draft thing, but in healthcare, you can't use it for, diagnostics or treatments yet.
Got it. Got it. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Robin Farmanfarmaian, thank you for being on Sauna Sessions.
Woohoo!
Great job.
I had a great time.
Awesome. Me too.